They came with songs and promises because the world taught them that wonder could topple kings. They came barefoot, with bread wrapped in rags, with eyes like lanterns and voices like prayer. And the sea answered them with a hunger no sermon could sate. Imagine 1,000 small hands gripping a rope as a wooden prow shuddered and splintered beneath them. Imagine the salt on their lips tasting of iron and old oaths. Imagine the hush after the last chant, the hush that smelled of wet wool and smoke and the human cost of belief. That hush is a grave with no name. This is not a cheerful tale of conquest. This is a story of conviction turned to ruin, of children pressed into the engines of faith and commerce, of how a single year, 1212, say some chroniclers, braided myth, mercy, and cruelty into a rope that would hang long in the memory of Europe. Some parts of this story are recorded with the cold ink of clerks. Some are murmured as rumor in taverns and abbeys. Where certainty fails, I will say so. Where the chronicles insist, you will hear them. If you want more of these slow-burning, cinematic histories where the sights, the smells, and the small human tragedies are not glossed over, like the video and subscribe. The bell that calls you back is the bell of the channel. Streets that learned to mourn. In the beginning, the movement is small, intimate, and human. It is a street-level awakening that swells into a procession nobody planned. The opening scene is the marketplace, where boy or a youth, names vary, from Nicholas of Cologne to a shepherd called Stephen in other accounts, begins to speak of a simple conquest. Walk to the Holy Land and the sea will part. The gates of Jerusalem will open for the innocent. He speaks like a bell, clear and unyielding. He promises miracles, but he gives something more dangerous: certainty. In the damp alleys of northern towns, mothers exchange looks that are equal parts fear and resignation. Fathers who have known hunger in their ribs find a strange buoyancy in the idea that a child might make the world right. The air carries the scents of wood smoke, of horse dung, of iron from the smithies, and underneath the sweeter tang of the bread the children clutch. At dusk, the town doors close, but voices gather on the streets, swelling until the square resembles an altar. Children sleep under carts, with the moon like a coin turned over on the cobblestones. A monk records names later with the clinical cruelty of ink. A tavern keeper remembers laughter. There is love here. There is also an opening for cruelty. Where sermons fail, myth moves in. The pacts they made with strangers. Travel begins, and with travel comes the market. Ships, pillagers, merchants who wear holiness like a coin and sell it back to the desperate. The children are no longer a rumor, but an army of the unarmed. They cross bridges and rivers, their feet raw, their songs steady. Along the way, they meet men who smell of wine and opportunity, captains who promise transport to the Holy Land, and financiers who see an opening. Some captains do what captains do: they betray. Others are men who have lost their own children to war and see in the youths a chance for redemption. The road is a ledger of choices, some of them kind, many of them deadly. The sea becomes a contract written in nails and sails. At ports, promises are measured in coin and in secrecy. The children sign pacts with hands that cannot yet shave, and the ink dries into destinies. Chroniclers who write years later will accuse merchants of treachery. Some modern historians will argue that economic forces, not malice, steered the tragedy. Yet the faces in the crowds do not care for such arguments. They care for bread and direction. This chapter explores how innocence was bargained away, how the machinery of trade swallowed pledges and spat out sorrow. the things that happen at sea. Bolts are small places for big calamities. In the goal-slashed mornings, the children stand shoulder to shoulder. What the kingdoms said of them. When the story returns to land, the rulers speak. Kings, bishops, and scribes decide how the tale will be cast in the light then choose. Some call the movement heretical, an embarrassment that must be corrected with sermons and proclamations. Others, perhaps fearing the contagion of such fervor, legislate to prevent future pilgrimages, laws written in the name of order. The response is not uniform. In some towns, charity is offered in the form of refuge. In others, authorities march to suppress the movement with cruelty, disguised as discipline. The chapter widens to examine how institutions reacted, how the church stitched doctrine onto grassroots faith, and how marketplaces recalibrated their ledgers. It asks how much of the tragedy was structural: poverty, chronic warfare, and a medieval economy that left many children with no stable future. It considers the aftermath: families that never found closure, towns that grew silent at the place where a festival once began, and chronicles that made heroes where there were only victims. Myth-making begins here. Legacies argued in the corridors of power and the quiet of parish records. The memory they left behind. Centuries later, the story endures, in fragments, in ballads, in the angry scrawl of a chronicler, and a grave unmarked at a foreign shore. What do we inherit from such a calamity? This final chapter traces the echo of the Children's Crusade through literature, through the cautionary tales told to other generations, and through the historians who wrestle with evidence and rumor. It contemplates the moral questions that still burn, the instrumentalization of innocence, the ways faith can be a weapon, the complicity of those who profit from pilgrimage. It asks whether calling these events a crusade dignifies them or misnames a calamity. It lingers on the human scale, the faces in the margins, the songs half remembered, and the few survivors who returned with stories that bent toward myth. It ends with a reflection on what it means to remember, whether memory honors the dead or turns them into symbols, whether telling the story can in itself be an act of reparation. Throughout, the chapter presses the senses, the grits in the teeth, the silence in an empty bed, and refuses to let the reader look away. Listen to the hush that follows the last chant, the empty square, the overturned cart, the salt on a sleeve where a small hand once clutched it. We have walked with them from the cobbles to the prow and back into the pages men wrote to soothe their consciences. And what remains is not tidy history, but a wound, threaded through with faith, hunger, greed, and an unquiet mercy. These were children whose courage was mistaken for strategy, whose songs became a currency others traded for profit. Their names are sometimes recorded, often lost, and always heavy. If there is a moral here, it is not a lesson you can pin to a sermon board, but a question that sits in your mouth like iron. How do we remember without making martyrs of victims? How do we learn without repeating the bargains that cost so much? Let this story be less a final verdict and more a summons. Carry their faces into places that forget. Speak their small truths in rooms that prefer big abstractions. And let memory do the slow work of reckoning. If this account moved you, keep the bell ringing. Like, subscribe, and share so these vanished voices do not dissolve into the sea of unremembered things.